the credibility of what your attackers can now fake and impersonate, those types of things have changed drastically, just even within the past few years. So when you're thinking from a situation of, hey, I'm used to from a risk standpoint, you're concerned about people breaking in. There's no longer that need to really break in when you can kind of blend in.
Hey there, welcome to 6x6 Lock, a secure money movement podcast for private markets. On this episode of the show, Peter Steppe and I are joined by Stacey Cameron, a former information systems security officer at the Department of Homeland Security, founder of CyCam Strategies, and the current chief information security officer at Halcyon, for a conversation that is equal parts eye-opening and urgent. Stacey and Peter pull back the curtain on how dramatically the threat landscape has shifted for firms in the private markets and why the processes that have felt safe and familiar for decades are now the very things putting capital at risk. We get into the rise of AI-powered attacks, why voice cloning is a bigger threat than deepfake video, and what it actually means to tie identity to a payment transaction. Stacey also shares a mindset shift she believes every firm needs to make right now. And trust me, it's a simple one, but it's a game changer. You're absolutely going to love this episode. Now, before we get to the conversation, please do make sure you take a moment to subscribe to the 6x6 Lock podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon, the YouTubes, or wherever you like to get your podcast jam on. And if you have a question or a suggestion for the show, hit us up. Just shoot us an email, podcast@6lock.com. Okay, let's get to the conversation with Stacey Cameron. Well, Stacey Cameron, Peter Steppe, so wonderful to see you. Welcome to the 6x6 Lock podcast.
Thank you. So happy to be here.
Yeah, thank you.
This is fantastic. So this is our first time, Peter and mine, recording a session together, which I'm really excited about this. But I'm extra excited to have you, Stacey. No shade on you, Peter, but it's not every day that we get to spend time with someone who is a former information systems security officer at the Department of Homeland Security, who's now gone on to be one of the world's leaders in the private cybersecurity space. So kind of cool stuff here. So,
Oh, well, I'm so happy to be here.
This is good. And, also you, Peter, slouch of the security side yourself, but, your deep expertise in the private capital markets and awesome stuff. And for those who don't know, you are the chief security officer at 6lock. So, you come with some swag as well. We like it. It's good. So I really do think our audience is going to get a ton of value out of today's conversation. So thank you both for carving out the time. We're going to be talking a lot about payments and fraud and what firms can do to protect themselves on the show today. But I thought a really cool way to kick this off, maybe with, especially given your backgrounds, is maybe illuminating your view from the front lines, if you will. All right, Stacey, let's start with you. From your vantage point, what are financial firms consistently misunderstanding about today's threat environment? I mean, imagine you've seen things that most people are unaware of, given your experience.
Oh, yeah. So the financial firms, they're experiencing the same thing that a lot of other sectors are experiencing. You're used to sort of your standard controls of perimeter protections and your multi-factors and we've hardened our systems, right? So we're in a day and age where it almost doesn't matter what you have in place. If someone really wants to get to information, if someone wants to disrupt your business, they're going to find a way to do it. So you've got to look into that next level of protection, that next level of resiliency. And then there's just a lot of assumptions that the financial sector is making. So, the financial sector is bread and butter, right? Bread and butter on what we are. And there's a lot of things of where, you assume an identity, you verify something once, and you don't understand that the landscape is constantly changing. And you constantly have to verify things and continuously review and validate in these types of areas that a lot of times it's no longer a singular event. You're continuously making these checks to do these validations. And a lot of that is happening, that there's really this gray space that's being exploited, right? So you've got emails and PDFs and spreadsheets and voice callbacks, the things that have been traditionally used in the financial sector as far as verification and understanding the risk and mitigating your risk. It just no longer works anymore. So we just we got to move fast forward and take it to that next level, because these attackers are getting very crafty.
I bet. Peter, like from your vantage point inside the industry, where do you see firms? I mean, you heard Stacey there. Like, some firms seem to be operating from a set it and forget it perspective, if you will. Like, where are you seeing firms still operating from like an outdated set of assumptions?
Yeah, well, I think in the private equity space and in the private markets, there's just a status quo that's been around for a long time. So they're used to doing things a certain way that feels comfortable for them. Unfortunately, some of those processes are pretty archaic at this point. The wire process was invented at the time of the telegraph. And so we're dealing with old technologies there in a lot of cases. And that creates challenges. I think, like Stacey mentioned, a lot of this ends up as unstructured data that you can't really manage. And I think that's one of the attack surfaces that people don't often realize.
Dive in a little bit about that. I don't want to have the assumption that everybody understands what unstructured data is, right? Because I think a lot of people in this space are like, hey, I press go on this stuff. Like, what do you mean unstructured data? What's happening there?
Yeah, so I think there's an assumption that the bank is doing a KYC and a KYB on the individual or the business when they open up a bank account. And they are doing that. So you do have that protection. But in the private market space, the private equity funds and the limited partners, their banking information that's already been established with the bank then has to go into different workflows. It needs to be part of the capital call and the distribution process. That often involves the fund admin, which is a totally separate company as well. So you have this relationship between these different parties, and the default is to manage that in a spreadsheet. So it's kind of where we typically end up. And as finance people, you would expect that, but that is kind of a inefficient thing, but it's also kind of an attack surface problem as well.
Interesting. Stacey, what do you think people inside firms are consistently like underestimating now, right? You hear like, we're talking about like this stuff goes back to the days of the telegraph, and we're still operating on some antiquated infrastructure here. But again, getting back to the kind of the threat matrix, if you will, or what could go wrong? What are you seeing, or have you seen that like firms just like aren't thinking about?
A lot of firms think they have some time, right? So the speed at which these attacks are unfolding is exponentially faster than what you were looking at even 5 years ago, right? And then the credibility of what your attackers can now fake and impersonate, those types of things have changed drastically, just even within the past few years. So when you're thinking from a situation of, hey, I'm used to from a risk standpoint, you're concerned about people breaking in. There's no longer that need to really break in when you can kind of blend in. And those types of things is what we're seeing and what people are still underestimating at this time. So a lot of times when you're thinking about that, you're like, okay, look at the financial industry and especially what we're doing here. In a lot of times now there's a sense of urgency. So, this deal needs to go through. I need to move funds here. And your attackers are able to take advantage of that urgency, right? So a lot of times it's easier for human error to take action during these sense of urgency. And in this day, in information age, right? So information is at our fingertips. There's, every time you turn around, some data is being breached. I mean, I'm getting fake PayPal code sent to my phone, so someone has my password somewhere doing weird things, but because we have those added layers, right, they're not able to exploit it. But those types of things is what you're and you don't want to underestimate these attackers anymore. The resources are so much easier for them. The risk is higher now because it's easier and accessible from that standpoint. So a lot of times you're trying to do capital costs, distributions, acquisitions, anything that's of an urgent need that's trying to happen. And now you have someone that's inserting themselves, whether it's a man in the middle or a business email compromise. Those are very notable attacks. So those types of things they're coming in and they're compromising an identity. So they're not creating a new one. They're using things that already exist. And those types of things with the advancements of AI and voice cloning and all those types of things, that you're able to really, really inject yourself in these processes, these trusted processes that are a little bit antiquated and no longer work as effectively, but really great from an attacker perspective. So that's a lot of what they're still taking advantage and violating your trust. And that is what you're still seeing, but only at an exponential level.
That's crazy. You mentioned urgency, and I want to get your take on that, Peter, because I don't know, it's always so funny when you think about it, like, oh, there's an urgency. I need to move money now. I need to do these things now. But that's a real world situation, right? And then in the private markets, there's oftentimes this has to happen today type of deal, right?
Yeah. I think the attackers love that, first of all. That's a frenetic process at times. And I think when you get into that kind of scrambling mode, that's when mistakes are made. So to the extent you can pre-plan these things and have everything ironed out before you actually initiate the process, you're in a much better position to deal with it effectively. And then it's also an efficiency thing as well, because there's this manual process of a batch of 100 wires or 200. It's just very time consuming for personnel. It's not easy for them to deal with. They don't have visibility into the right things. So there's just a myriad group of problems there, both from a cybersecurity perspective, but also from a business process perspective as well.
Yeah, makes sense. Stacey, you mentioned something that really kind of caught my ear, and we talked a little bit about this in the prep call as well. You mentioned that, how dramatically different some things are like 5 years ago. And this is my favorite quote. I've used this quote like 1 billion times, it feels like, on podcasts, but it's a Bill Gates quote in which he says, people tend to overestimate the amount of change that'll happen in 2 years, but greatly underestimate the amount of change that'll happen in 10 years. Don't allow yourself to be lulled into inaction. And it's really interesting. You chose a number like that's right in the middle, 5 years there. Right? But a lot has changed in the last 5 years that has, frankly, altered the landscape for cybersecurity, for payment security, and opened the opportunity for fraudsters to get in there and do stuff. What have been some of the biggest changes in the last 5 years that have made the biggest impact?
Well, one obvious that this is the talk of the town, right? AI.
Yeah.
AI is I would say the largest change, and not just because of the ingenuity with it, but the impact that it's having and the accessibility and the feasibility, right, of using AI and being adapted. You no longer have to be the expert into certain processes because it's already out there. The information is there. But when you're looking at years ago, you're okay, maybe you can find code and maybe you can reuse code or reuse some processes, but it's going to require some level of strong technical background to be successful without getting caught when you're looking at these types of exploitations within the financial industry. But now it's to the sense, okay, yes, everything's on Tor or dark web and those types of things. So now you have anonymity, and then you have other things from that aspect of now you can accelerate. So it didn't just show up, right? So we didn't wake up one day in crisis. These things were built over time. And when you're looking at, as they're being built, these attacks, these protections that need to be put in place, we still have these legacy tools that we're using. So things are happening over the wire. You've got emails and you have all these types of things that you have to deal with. But now you have new age tools and changes that are rapidly increased. I mean, it's really easy when you're talking about, now that tenure aspect is going to be even larger, right? Because what's happening from even changes from just a year ago, right? So you're looking at, I believe Q1 in 2025, just with financial breaches using types of fraud, 200 million easily in a quarter.
Wow.
And that's just the first quarter of 2025. And that's like the loss in funds just based on financial fraud. So those types of things are just going to keep growing because of that accessibility. Now, like traceability, because sometimes you can recover. And nowadays it's very difficult to recover from that type of loss. So you really need to do things up front and keep up. And I like to take a approach of stay ahead. We see these things coming. Let's stay ahead of it as best as we can. And you don't need to do it all yourself. I work in a place of risk. One of the great things that we love to do other than avoid is transfer. So it's no longer my problem. Let it be someone else's problem, but someone who can solve the problem that I need.
I love that. I love the idea. Transfer the risk. We talk about that with insurance, right? Like in our lives, right? Hey, listen, what's the risk? If your house burns down, well, I can transfer that risk to this thing called an insurance company, right? Avoid it being all on my back. Peter, what are your thoughts here? I mean, you've been in the industry for a while, and I don't want to say how long. You know, nobody likes to be dated. Yeah, exactly. But no,
we'll just keep it as a while.
You're a veteran. You're a veteran, as they say. In the NBA, you're a veteran if you've been in there for 4 years or something like that. So you're a vet. Here we go. But why do you think the private markets kind of felt insulated for so long? I guess that's an interesting question there. So, because I spent a lot of time in the financial world, right? They're not always laggards out of obstinance of just being lazy. That's not it. But there's something different to it, right? Like, sometimes it's regulatory constraints and they have to move a little slower to make sure everything's bulletproof. But on the private market side, what do you think's caused them to kind of go a little bit slower here and feel a little more insulated from this fraud risk? And now everybody seems to be waking up to it a little more. Like smelling salts, I guess.
Well, first off, I think like these are high trust, high value functions we're talking about, kind of integral parts of their business. So when they're used to doing things a certain way, there's just a natural tendency to continue to do things the way they've done it in the past. I think as we move into this new threat landscape with AI, you really have to rethink that, because the challenges are just so much more severe now. We often talk about AI with all the positive aspects to it, and it's amazing the innovation and what you can do with it, writing code, et cetera. But it's a great tool in the hands of the attacker as well. And I think that's something that a lot of people don't quite grasp, that the attackers have more tools at their disposal than they did in the past. And it's easier to impersonate people than it used to be. So you might not have been worried about it before because it was harder. Now it's a lot easier. So, I think you have to realize where we are and just how quickly things are moving, because they're moving very fast.
And then even Peter, what you were saying right there, when you're talking about now that it's easier, because before you're thinking you had to almost make a physical presence to really be effective to impersonate when you're dealing with these financial transactions. And now everything can just be done where I am sitting right now. And sometimes even, you can do things from your phone and what have you and be very successful. So it's not the people that's broken. It's the processes that just need to be fine-tuned, because now you have legacy processes in a new threat environment. So we just got to keep up.
Yeah. It's really interesting. You're both going to hit on this. Is a lot of times these markets are smaller than people realize in terms of the human beings involved, right? It's the small networks. So Peter, you talked about, they've known folks for a while, right? It's hey, if I have worked with Peter for 20 years and we have done lots of deals together, and I've moved money to Peter's firm and all that type of stuff, whether it's in a PE environment or a venture capital environment, right? These are my guys, right? My ladies. This is the people that I work with alongside. So of course, Stacey sends me an email. Sure, hook her up. This is the way we do things. We can move quickly, as you said, but that kind of helps us switch gears into this next topic of identity, right? Like, because a lot of people think about, from a security perspective, they think about the locks on their door. They think about the dual factor authentication getting on your phone or what passwords, all that type of stuff is you're making sure the Wi-Fi actually has a hard password on it so that people can't just get into your system. But they don't always talk about identity as being a core component about this. And we'll start with you on this, Peter. Help unpack that concept of identity and versus just general authentication, because I'm not sure that all of us fully appreciate it or really understand when we're talking about identity, what it really means here.
Yeah, well, we all use email. So a lot of times in our systems, email becomes the identity, someone's email address. So I think it's important to leverage modern technology to enable these workflows. Email is always going to be part of that. So we're not trying to eliminate email or secure email, but I think this really is where the industry is going, where we need to do identity verification. We need to know that the person on the other side is actually who they say they are. So like you said, Mike, you might have been doing business with me for a long time and you trust Peter's Peter, but have you verified that? Because someone might be impersonating me.
And then, in what Peter's talking about there, you're talking about, when we talk about legacy, right? When the identity necessarily wasn't bound to a transaction, right? So you're making your transactions efficiently in the same way that you tend to do it. And there's sometimes maybe a person involved. Yeah. But now you're to the point where it worked when that type of fraud was rare, but now it's unsophisticated. And now you're doing it when their impersonation is cheap and scalable and precise. So those types of things, this is the world that we're living. And one of the things, after meeting Peter and really understanding more about what they're doing, and one of the things I really fell in love with understanding the product is tying that process to that trust level, that identity to that transaction from where it originated to where it's going, to make sure that every time you do that transaction, it is still valid. And you're not just doing that one-time check, because and I used to do social engineering. So from that standpoint, from an attack space, I'm like, please let me take advantage of this. Yeah. So yeah.
That's great. I love the fact that you had this this prior life of like, I'm going to think like a villain, then go in here and do some shady stuff, like with a white hat. Yeah. That's called for those who are in the audience, that's called a white hat hacker, a white hat attacker versus a black hat who's actually trying to do bad stuff. But what a fun experience. I get to be a villain.
I felt so bad about it, but I was so good at it. It was just one of those things where I had to put it in the space of, we're helping people build resiliency within their systems. And then I'll go in and trick myself and get into their building and get on there. So those types of things. But from that aspect, you've got to kind of look from the other side so you can stay ahead and be protective and then resilient from that matter, because we're beyond just standard protections at this point.
Mm-hmm. And it's not, legal to take someone's identity, but that's for the fraudsters and for the people that are doing this, those aren't real high considerations for them. So I think trust is built on relationships in the private equity space. And those are trusted relationships. You just got to make sure that you know that everyone is who they say they are. And identity is a big part of that.
So I know we're going to get more into this later, but what are the different ways to verify that somebody that this is the right person, right? Because we think about it, right? So if I were to call Stacey right now, on my cell phone, it's like, she'd assume it's me coming through. She'd say, "Oh, that's Mike's number lighting up. It's him." Or if I sent her a text or an email, she would assume it was me. How do I make sure, or how does she make sure that it's me? Because if I were just going to shoot the breeze about our whiskey tasting that's coming up, for you, we're talking about whiskey tasting before we started clicking record today. Anyway, let's just say we're doing that. And so she'd have no reason to wonder if it's really me or whatever. But in this scenario where I'm saying, "Hey, Stacey, we're ready for you to wire the 13.5 that you said you were going to invest in this new company," now it becomes a real deal. what are some mechanisms there that kind of go beyond, like, she just recognizes me on her phone, or whether that's email, phone call, or text?
Yeah, I think there's new technologies available to help you verify people's identities. So we're leveraging those at 6lock. I think, it's a complex problem, first of all. I think we all see kind of some of the new things that are being done to impersonate people. And, you see people doing video on social media of an actor that's not really that actor.
Yeah.
Very easy things to do now, right? So you need to use advanced techniques to combat those. You need to be context aware around a lot of different data points. So there's a variety of techniques that we can leverage. Yeah.
What we're saying is we don't give away the secret sauce here. You have to come and learn more. Well, let's get into the deepfake stuff, because you brought that up, and it is a really big deal, right? This is something that just frankly that's going back that 5 years, right? 5 years ago, deepfakes really just weren't a thing. You had to have a lot of extremely expensive and powerful computing horsepower to pull this stuff off. But as we're seeing, there are increasingly really accessible tools, many of which are close to free, that anyone can do to create a deepfake. And we see a lot of people playing around with it and goofing around with it, like you said, people pretending to be actors or whatever online, and people pretending to show themselves, like, walking through the streets of Paris when they're actually just, here in Austin, Texas. But so, Stacey, when people hear deepfakes, I think that's what they think of, right? Okay, this is me impersonating Peter or some other famous person. But AI's doing a lot more than just deepfake video, right? They're doing some other thing. You're able to do other things if you're a bad actor. So, what are you seeing that's beyond just the silly stuff?
So, absolutely. So I'm glad you brought that up, right? Yes, everyone's bringing the deepfakes, AI videos, but voice cloning is really big now, right? So these are things that you need to be concerned with. And it's not just the fact that they're doing voice cloning, but they're using voice cloning, they're using the videos, they're still using smishing, which is over SMS, and phishing. So that's the video phishing and spear phishing for executives and those types of things. So there's a lot of combinations that they're using, but now that you're adding that voice component into the workflow, and it's really good now. So before you would look into it and you're like, oh, this is not, it's in English, but it's broken English. So I'm like, okay, this, I'm gonna raise a red flag here. But even now, because you look at different threat groups, and a lot of the ones that FBI are following or what have you, they're using affiliates and what have you. So if they're doing something in the UK, then they're going to have someone reach out with a British accent or clone and what have you. So they don't even, and those are not even fake accents. Those are the real deal, but they're still using that to mislead you. So they're being very creative now. So, and now with the technology, the voice cloning, you only need about 3 to 5 seconds of your voice. And I could grab that from a voicemail, from a podcast, or any, you grabbing your Starbucks order, those types of things, right? So there's so many vectors, threat vectors that are out here. So you really have to pay attention now. And, that's why you have these additional checks in places where you have, okay, it's not just the password. Now, it may be a message where you're entering a PIN or an authenticator and those types of things to add other layers of validation. I mean, let's just not make it easy. Let's not give them the keys. Let's make them work for it. So those types of things. And if it doesn't seem right, it may not be right. So a lot of things were done manually, but now let's use the same technologies that the bad actors are using. So we're going to use AI. We're going to use programmatic ways to make it easier on our end to detect and to verify and validate. I created a new word, validate.
I like it, validate. Well, look, we got vishing and smishing, so why not validate? I like it.
I think just to add to that, I think that's great. I think, in the private market space, voice cloning is something really to think about, because there's still a lot of callback verification being done. give an example, like you call the LP and say, is this your banking information or not? And so that's a very manual process too. I think it's important for people to understand that that's not the most efficient business process. LPs are busy. They travel a lot. They don't want someone calling to try to verify their banking information in the first place. But it's very easily spoofed now. So I think that's kind of one of those examples that we've kind of gone beyond that, where you can't really rely on something you were able to rely on in the past.
Makes a lot of sense. It's interesting. I'm glad we're talking about like it's not 100% technology. It's really important that you have this bulletproof technology in here, but there's also a component of adjusting your behavior. Whereas before you might have had a attitude of trusting openly that, oh, Stacey's calling me, Stacey's texting me. Great, it's Stacey. Why not? I love Stacey, right? We drink whiskey together all the time. Okay, last whiskey joke. But, okay, great. Now it's like you actually have to put a step in as a human when you're thinking, hold on a second, even though I'm pretty sure it's her, there is the reality of, as you said, Peter, there's so much data out there about your voice. We were talking, Stacey, you mentioned that, people could listen to this podcast and pick up my voice and be like, oh, great, I'm going to impersonate Mike's voice, and oh, by the way, here's a couple of things they talked about that sound somewhat personal, right? The whiskey stuff and whatever. You're like, great, I can work that into a conversation and it'll sound legit, right? So we have to at least put the brakes on and we're talking about brakes in a little bit, but put the brakes on just to make sure that the technology has a chance to do its job.
I like that. Let the tech work for you.
That's right. Let the tech work for you. Don't be the one who's like, well, okay, darn it was you. It's so funny. It's like, and by the way, anybody has experienced this. Everyone has somebody in their life who has clicked on the dumb thing in the email or on Facebook or whatever that starts spamming everybody in there and like, oh, Aunt Nancy, come on, man. Like, and then they're like, my Facebook account was hacked. No, it wasn't. You clicked on something dumb and now it's doing some dumb stuff. Sorry, Nancy. It's you. Anyway, hopefully Nancy's not watching this. I do have an Aunt Nancy. She's going to be mad about this one. All right. Sure. Exactly. She knows I love her. She's my favorite. Okay. Let's switch gears into like what you're actually seeing out there. Cause I think sometimes this really kind of helps. Like where's the rubber meet the road? What are you seeing? So I guess without naming names, if you could maybe describe some situations, real world situations, or patterns that you're seeing repeatedly in the market that are like, this is why we do this, right? This is why Stacey and her team do this. This is why Peter and his team are here for saving companies from themselves in many cases, or from the bad actors, putting that protective. So we'll start with you, Stacey. What are some of the things that you've seen or patterns you've been seeing recently that people should be aware of?
Yeah, I mean, so even whether they're using voice clone technology or not, they're still calling people pretending to be someone familiar. And where these are real live events that have happened, that we've seen people get a man-in-the-middle attack via email, that is still the business email compromise. You're still seeing a lot of those. And they're like, hey, we've changed account numbers. And they're like, okay, let's follow up. And you don't know until after the money is gone, right? And someone's calling like, oh, why did this go here? Or I didn't receive X, Y, and Z. And those types of things are still happening. We're looking at AI-generated voice clones that are in high pressure financial situations. These are realistic deepfakes. These things are actually happening. So they're manipulating corporate employees and they're tricking them into wiring funds. And those types of things are happening as well. They're mimicking government officials. So a lot of things, these are real world examples of things that are still happening and being tracked and being monitored. These groups are growing. These groups are, when they're being arrested or the pressure has been applied, they're breaking down and they're becoming new groups. So you have all these different threat actor groups that are being malicious and using all this technology to be effective in these situations. So don't make it easy for them. Yeah. Make them work for it a little bit. And those are places from while we have critique of. with things that are coming. So like the voice cloning, yes, seeing that. Man in the middle, absolutely. And definitely using multiple avenues. Like the sophistication of the attacks are, I would say, they're increasing, right? People aren't just trying to break in anymore, but they're spending months on reconnaissance and what have you, so they can start injecting themselves into the process. And sometimes they get into your network, and they're just in your network for a while, and they're learning, so they can be successful, because the more that they know, the more information that they have, the more likely, and the larger payday. It all boils down to that's what they're getting paid doing these things. That's why it keeps happening, and that's what they're out to do. And they're not out here working for free. But those types of things, and are actively being monitored, and it's a global. It's not just here in the U.S. It's all over. So UK, lots of different places. So you still have voice cloning that's still coming up, probably third. But it's still, that the email compromise, man in the middle, some basics, some fundamentals that they're still taking advantage of. But those areas we're still seeing, and it's only going to get worse.
Yeah. Well, I don't say I like it, but I think it's important that you mentioned the whole. It's not always a scenario where the threat actor shows up and commits the fraud, the threat attack, whatever, on day one. Sometimes they get in the house, they monitor things, and they're there for a while, and that heightens the level of importance for having firms like yours assessing, threats and so forth, and making sure the right things are in place to be able to detect when they're in there. That's really important too, right? Like it's one thing that, hey, I think we've done everything to lock the doors and turn the alarm system on and so forth, but would you actually know if somebody was in the house?
Yeah, I think the threat detection is important, Mike. I agree.
Yeah.
But the reason they're in there is they're waiting, right?
Yeah.
What are they waiting for? You should ask that question. A lot of times that's a money movement event that they're waiting for. Mm-hmm. So that's where the transactional integrity that Stacey and I wrote about in our white paper comes into play, right? You have to have transactional integrity. And they're kind of going after the lowest hanging fruit. So like Stacey said, don't make it easy for them, make it harder, because they're going to go after the easier targets. That's just good business, if you will, on their side. They're going to go after the ones that are the most vulnerable. So, I think it's important not to put yourself in that situation.
Really smart, really smart. And by the way, I want to make sure we're going to get that white paper linked up here on the show notes. So we'll get that later. So make sure you send that over to me, and we'll get that all hooked up. We want people to be able to read that. Okay, so we're getting towards the end here. One of the things I want to spend a little bit of time on is exactly what we were just talking about, maybe in a little more depth, right? During our prep call, Peter, you used an analogy that really popped out to me because I'm a race car fan, so maybe that's why it was extra awesome for me. But you said you put brakes on a car, not to make them go slower, but to make it go faster, right? And that's 100% true. And anyone who's a Formula One fan, although while we're recording this, all the new liveries and cars are being revealed this week, so super exciting stuff. Anyway, so let's dive into that. Well, what do you mean by that? Unpack that a bit for the audience so they get a better understanding of what that means. And then kind of we'll talk a little bit about putting brakes on cars so members of our audience can go faster.
Yeah. Well, I think if we look at it from an F1 perspective and an F1 race car, I think that's probably a good place to start, because you want to move very fast in the straightaway. But when you're moving real fast in the straightaway, you need to slow down when you get to the curve. Yeah. And then the reason you slow down when you're getting into the curve is so that you can accelerate out of it. So, security should be an enabler to your business. It shouldn't be a blocker. A lot of times people view security as a blocker. Yeah. But really, good security allows your business to move faster, allows you to do things you weren't able to do before.
I love it. It's similar to, across the financial ecosystem, we have regulations and compliance as well, right? That are basically there for a reason, right? They're guardrails for the system to make sure the system keeps flowing. They're not there to be like, I always jokingly call the compliance person the chief nope officer, but they're not necessarily there just to say no. They're saying no to protect the firm, right? To make sure the firm doesn't go out of business and get regulators in there, But regulations are there to protect the overall system, and then here security is there to protect you as well in a very similar fashion, and it will allow you to be just a much better business. Stacey, your experience goes back to being in the government, or the Department of Homeland Security. You probably have a unique vantage point on that. What surprised you about the government and institutions and the way that they've been responding recently? Because I think people do wonder about that. Like, hey, is it all on me, or is the system going to be secured too from all these AI bad actors and all this type of stuff? Have you seen anything on the governmental side?
Yeah, and so the background I have being with the government, federal civilian, federal law enforcement, and even in Department of Defense as well. So being from the military side, there's all different sectors, and they all approach things in a different fashion. But even over time, a lot of times they started seeing the benefit of being able to reuse like standards and guidelines. And I think that's what's happening now. Yeah. So when we're looking at where we're going and we're talking about putting the brakes on to go faster, I love that analogy, because even though I'm familiar with the reportable line area, I am familiar with going fast in cars and knowing how to brake on the accelerator, because I learned that in fitness. But it's the same. It's the same fashion. Let's take a look and let's see what's going on. Let's see who's impacted. Let's see how there's impact. And from a government standpoint, let's help everyone out, right? So you have areas still under DHS, right? So they're responsible for internet safety, right? Making the internet safe. That is their job, and they will reach out to folks and say, hey, we're starting to see these things on the internet, on the dark web, or what have you. And helping out from that. And ask. You don't have to ask. The FBI will show up at your door. You don't even have to ask for it. Just be involved in a breach that no one's aware of. But those types of things. But from that standpoint, what helps us is laws and regulations, right? Because you have vendors that are coming out building tools, and a lot of these things, yes, they're going to enable us and help us do certain things, but you don't want to put the consumer's privacy at risk or their data at risk and those types of things. And if there aren't those security regulatory guardrails to not hamper your business, but help you do it without opening up other holes or other issues and challenges that are going to occur if you move too fast with it. So hence the brakes. And I love that analogy.
I love it. Yeah. It is really good. So as we close things out here, I love it. I feel like we're closing on an upbeat, right? We, obviously our laws, regulations, and we have governmental agencies that are there trying to obviously create some systemic protection and detection. And then we have firms like yours, Stacey, and SixLock that are there to help firms as well. If you had to, I guess, offer firms quick mindset takeaway, if you will, from this conversation, what should it be? I guess what's kind of your closing takeaway?
Well, that's a fun one.
Yeah.
Now there's a lot of things that we discussed today, and if I had to sort of, in one key takeaway is from the financial aspect. We're going to talk about from the financial sector. When you're dealing with your transactions, you want to don't assume it's protected and safe. Just assume there's some type of compromise. Assume that there's some type of injection in this process. And how would you facilitate this transaction assuming that there is some type of fraudulent activity that may occur. When you assume that nature, then it allows you to be a little bit more diligent. You're not just going to be auto trusting. You're going to make sure you have the right tools in place that are doing your due diligence, because nobody wants to have to file an insurance claim for these type, and to be denied because you didn't do what you needed to do, right? So if because we've talked about being in the insurance and that there to protect you, but now with fraud and all types of threats increasingly growing, the conditions are changing from that aspect. So it's being put back onto the consumer to make sure that when you're doing these transactions, when you're doing these validations, that you have the right things and the right keys in place. So sort of assume that you're going to be attacked and plan accordingly.
I love it. And Peter, that really feels like a great way to wrap it up, because it's like your business you need to know that you have the protections in place, right? And the insurance companies are going to want to know you have and your banking partner is going to want to know you make sure you have these protections in place, because they're not going to bail you out if you knowingly didn't do that stuff.
Yeah. I think, looking at these things up front, like Stacey talked about, is really important. So a lot of times we're dealing with these issues after the fact. That's not great. Like it's better to deal with it before you get into these events where you're moving money, so you should really think about it preemptively and try to establish good practices so you can avoid situations you don't want to be in.
Love it. Well, this has been a fantastic conversation. Stacey Cameron, people can find you on LinkedIn. We'll make sure you have that linked up. You have two websites we want to send people to, CyCam.io and Halcyon.ai. Any other place, if people want to just continue to get the fire hose awesomeness from Stacey Cameron and all her security genius, where should they be looking to find you?
I mean, it's LinkedIn. Mention LinkedIn. LinkedIn is the best way, because anything that's coming up, anything that I'm doing, any speaking engagements or conferences, I usually make sure that they're posted on LinkedIn. So that is the best way to keep up with me and to reach out. So look forward to hearing from you all.
Awesome stuff. Well, thank you guys.
And I do want to say one more thing, especially
go ahead.
Peter's here. And I had the pleasure of learning and understanding and working with him and co-authoring a white paper, but really had to understand the ins and outs of 6LOC. So it really takes the risk from your individual firm and it puts it on a system that understands today's threat landscape, and it's designed to overcome those legacy processes. So that's one thing that I did want to put out there from the 6LOC standpoint, because it's been really great working with Peter this past year or so.
Wonderful stuff. Well, awesome stuff. Well, great to see you guys. Thank you very much for coming on the show.
And where can we find Peter?
Oh, why would you want to find Peter? Peter, we can find you. Where can we find you, buddy?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn as well, so we can go to LinkedIn. That's a trusted source. Yeah. And we're at 6lock.com, and look forward to talking about these topics more and getting more in depth on them.
Fantastic stuff. Well, it's great to see you guys. Thank you very much for coming on the show. Awesome stuff.